What are the five biggest Saturdays in college football this year? I don't think anyone who has glanced at their schedule can look past October 12th. October 12th is clearly the monster Saturday of college football season this year. That's week 7 for those of you who like to keep track in those terms. This is the day where at the same time, or within about a 6-hour span, Ohio State will go to Oregon, Ole Miss will go to LSU, Penn State will go to USC, and Texas will face Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. Now, those are just your 4 headliners. I mean, those are 4 like grade A headline matchups. This same day in the SEC is Florida versus Tennessee Day. This is also the same day that Kansas State goes to face Deion in Colorado. Washington at Iowa, Jed Fish rolling into Iowa City. And then that bottom one there, if you're listening on podcast, you can't see this, but those watching on YouTube, I got Syracuse at NC State. Now, some are looking at that saying, why is that on the list? You need to understand your schedule dynamics here. Syracuse does not play all that tough a schedule this year. NC State's got a pretty navigable schedule as well. They could have much better records than you think they'll probably be capable of by this point, so just pay attention to that game. Now, that's one that's going to be talked about, okay? October 12th is going to be talked about a lot. But what about 4 more that I want to get to? A few weeks after that, week 11. This is going deep. This is going into November now. November 9th is week 11. Oh, this one's very, very big as well. Immunity. Georgia at Ole Miss. As the preseason rankings sit, that's a top 6 matchup. JP poll's not too far off of that for the record. So you got Georgia at Ole Miss, Bama at LSU, same day. Oklahoma at Missouri, same day. Now, of course, we're 11 weeks into the season here, so Oklahoma, they've already played Tennessee. They've gone to Auburn. They've played Texas. What's the record at that point? We don't know. So all we have to go on right now is preseason rankings. Florida's at Texas that day. Again, many of you don't expect Florida to do much this year, but all I can do is I can tell you I've got Florida power rated as the 21st best team in the country. What you think their record's going to be is irrelevant to how you power rate the team. So we're looking at a couple of, top 20, well, one top 5 team, one top 20-ish caliber team there. Even if Florida isn't much to write home about record-wise, no one's predicting that kind of upset for Texas, but yet it's a landmine sort of game. And that's the top of the card. The mid-card on Week 11 slate, which I would argue is not mid-card at all. It's just a little bit further down. I can't claim we were going alphabetically here either. You know what? Florida State Notre Dame's a really big game. That's a top 10 matchup in the preseason. That's up in South Bend. Florida State playing in northern Indiana in early November. Just keep an eye on that. Washington's at Penn State that day. Now, that game could be the whiteout game. Remember, we've got the greatest sport on the face of the earth. We've got the best traditions on the face of the earth. Penn State's whiteout is among the very best traditions in a tradition-rich sport, and we've got television networks paying hundreds of millions to billions of dollars to acquire the rights, also they can make the time slots such that we can't get the traditions. It's wonderful. Anyway, so Washington may be the whiteout game for Penn State. Clemson's at Virginia Tech that day. Now, Virginia Tech has already played who at this point? They've gone to Miami. They've got some early season tests, but there's no early season test that Virginia Tech faces where you say, nah, they can't get past that one. Virginia Tech, man, they could be in a situation where they're contending for the ACC championship and Clemson comes to town. Miami goes to Georgia Tech that same day. Some of you may be watching college football for the first time in your lives. Welcome. Welcome to the table. We've got room for all. I need to tell you that Miami-Georgia Tech game, if you want to go and make yourself familiar with some stuff that happened last year in absence of a much stronger term, just go check out the ending of that Miami-Georgia Tech game. So that's a loaded slate. Week 11's a loaded slate. Later, and this is rivalry weekend in Week 14, so of course I've got to fit rivalry weekend. We had a debate internally in the office today. Should we even include rivalry week? Because that's like a given. And the answer was, of course we should include rivalry week. Michigan at Ohio State. Texas at Texas A&M. There is pound for pound not a game I'm looking forward to seeing more this year than Texas going to Texas A&M. Not a neutral site game. We're going into Kyle Field for that one. Oklahoma at LSU. You need to make yourself familiar with this. So this is the week where if you've got a traditional rival, you're playing them. But Oklahoma, Texas happens in the middle of the year. So they're not playing each other last week. LSU doesn't have anyone that they're going to traditionally be paired with during rivalry week. So all of a sudden we get Oklahoma versus LSU dropped in our lap. We, of course, have Notre Dame at USC dropped in our lap. We've got Florida at Florida State on this day. We've got South Carolina at Clemson on this day. We've got Auburn at Alabama on this day. And remember, Washington and Oregon played twice last year. Oregon 0 for 2. Probably a different dynamic this year. But again, that's why we play the games instead of just predicting them on this interesting material called paper. Next up, all right, we get back into the heat of October here. October 26th is week 9. So we're a little bit deeper in the season here as well. Missouri's got, by my memory, one game against a top 10 opponent, preseason top 10 opponent this year. And it's this day. It's Missouri at Alabama. Oklahoma goes to Ole Miss on this day. You know, when people talk about Ole Miss, they say, oh, they got to play Georgia. Oh, they got to go to LSU. No one really talks about, just Oklahoma coming into Oxford. Florida State at Miami is on this same day. I mean, that could have ACC championship implications. It has its own internal implication baked in because it should be one of the best rivalry games in college football. We talked about this a couple of shows ago. Nebraska's at Ohio State. Now, you know there are a lot of folks who think Nebraska will be undefeated when they go there. And that's interesting because it's not week 2, it's week 9. So if Nebraska's toting a 7 or 8-0 record into the horseshoe, boy, we haven't felt hype like that around Nebraska since the 90s. And then on the undercard of week 9, Rutgers is at USC. I don't want you laughing at this because Rutgers has a very workable schedule this year as well. They got some veteran leadership on that team. It's Greg Schiano in year 3. Do your research, kids. Penn State's at Wisconsin this day. I'm going to come back to that one in a second. Just bookmark that. LSU's at Texas A&M and Kansas at Kansas State. And if I'm not mistaken, Jesse, Kansas State is fresh off a trip to West Virginia the week before, one of the bigger trap spots on their schedule. Okay, this Penn State-Wisconsin game. You know we're really big on the buy advantage / buy disadvantage. Big-time buy advantage for Penn State here. Penn State is off a bye, so Penn State's rested. They go on the road. Wisconsin is off of back-to-back road games. I think one of them's to Rutgers, but most importantly, the week before they play Penn State, they go to Washington. So they got one of those cross-country trips Wisconsin never takes, the second leg of a back-to-back road stretch, and then they come home to play a rested Penn State. And by the way, Colin, I doubt you just randomly have Wisconsin's schedule in there, but I think I have it up here. There may not have been a better year ever to be a Wisconsin season ticket holder than this year because you got Oregon coming in there, you got Penn State coming in there, you've got Alabama coming in there, and there are some folks around here. I was looking at NC State's home schedule last night. It's brutal. Listen to this. They get Bama at home, they get Penn State at home, and they get Oregon at home, Minnesota to wrap up the year on a Friday. That is value. That is you invest for a decade to get that kind of home stretch. Now, the South Dakota tickets may be able to be had at bargain basement prices. Purdue comes in there probably without a ton of fanfare, but still, how about those big 3? All right, and lastly, the last of the big 5 weeks in college football this year, not that we limit it to 5. I would like to take you to September 28th. It's week 5. Georgia's at Alabama. Could very well be the game of the year. It's been the matchup along with Ohio State, Michigan, that sort of has defined the last few years in college football. Arizona at Utah is that day as well. Oklahoma State at Kansas State. 2 of the biggest games in the Big 12 are both on this day, September 28th. Louisville's at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, in many people's estimations, kind of play a 3-game season this year. They open at A&M. They got FSU up there later in the year. They also get Louisville in there. So those are the 3 big games for Notre Dame this year. That's not all, though. Also in week 5, we've got Arkansas at Texas A&M. Well, not at Texas A&M, although I would contend Arkansas needs to get out of this playing in Arlington every year as quick as they can, and I think they are. I think this may be the last year. You got Oklahoma at Auburn. That's the week after OU has faced Tennessee. They go to Auburn. That 2-game stretch, I think, will serve to define what Oklahoma is this year. Tech is at Miami on a Friday night. Oh, the possibilities there, by the way. If you have access to private aviation, oh, the possibilities. Kentucky at Ole Miss is this day as well. Again, I just mentioned Oklahoma going to Oxford. Kentucky, I think we've got them power rated in the mid-20s in the JP poll, 26th, I believe. Just ho-hum. No one's talking about it. I mean, Ole Miss is viewed as having an extremely favorable schedule, and by SEC standards, they do. They don't have an easy schedule. There are two different concepts there. So those are the 5 weeks. Now, I put this out earlier tonight, or earlier today. I asked you guys, and I got all kind of responses. So this is college football, as many of you pointed out. This is college football. So if we've got a Saturday, I mean, we only get 12 of them per team. We have to cherish them, and cherish them we will.